So recently, my friend recommended to me this small little old RPG called Arvale, The Journey of Illusion. Apparently, this game came out in like 2005 and only for the pocket PCs, these weird half a mobile, half a PC devices. And, well, when I first looked at it, I have to say I did not like it. It looked very odd, very old, but most importantly, it can only be played in a tiny window. I mean, what you see right now is like infinitesimally bigger than what I had to play it on. So that was a bit of a problem. However, I still try to dive into the game, and although it's probably not my favorite, it was certainly a journey. I didn't play through all of it, I only played through like the first act, and I would like to share my experience with you. So sit back, enjoy, and let's get to it. The game starts with a nice little exposition with a font that is perhaps not really good for reading at this screen size, but never mind. The story is actually relatively simple. Gods created dragons and humans. Dragons, the firstborn, were gifted with magic, while humans were gifted with creativity and thirst for knowledge. And eventually, dragons and humans sort of got together and started just experimenting with magic and living in harmony. But then this sort of enraged this dark dragon who went on a killing spree, killing all the dragons and attacking even humans. This eventually culminated into this legend of a hero, or hero of the legend, who would basically, well, be the hero. He would rise up, defeat the dragon, return it to its slumber, and, well, do some hero stuff. Now, the story was relatively simple because we play as one of those heroes. Every time the dragon stirs from its slumber, new hero is chosen, and the main protagonist of this game is Duncan. Duncan is, well, a gardener in an Entoki castle, Entoki being or Entoke, I have no idea how to pronounce like all the names in this story, so it's quite difficult to say, but let's go with Entoki. Entoki is basically this entire continent, and he works at the castle being the royal gardener. But then he is called to the king who, well, is a bit of a weirdo. The king basically tells Duncan that he is the hero of the legend, and that the hero of the legend would be, a character with brown hair, and he would be brave and would actually refuse the quest. To be honest, it just sounds like the king is just making it all up. Like, the entire thing being good with math just because Duncan said something about percentage. It just seemed like he wanted to get rid of us or force us to go on this quest. It was a bit odd, and at the time I didn't really think much of it. I just thought it was because the game had strange writing. But this was actually a very interesting foreshadowing, and I will go back to that. Either way, we chatted with the king, and the king actually told us that, well, we don't really have a choice. The dragon is waking up, we need to find him, find a way to subdue him, and just do all of that in the next couple of hours of game time. That was a bit too much, honestly. Talk about a quick start, but yeah, that's the story of how we came to be this hero, and our next stop is a village called Nikal, which is supposed to be like this tutorial area where they teach the heroes how to be hero. So yeah, sure, why not? Now, I didn't jump into the story straight away, I just took a time to explore the Entoki castle and learn the mechanics. Basically, the game seemed relatively simple with, different sort of potions you can use, healing items, different weapons, and so on. You also have different stats. Strength for damage with weapons, dexterity for avoiding, knowledge for the ability to use magic, resistance as a magical resistance, and armor against physical attacks. There is also the quest journal, but to be honest, the quests are really, really poorly done because it just doesn't tell you everything. There isn't even a conversation log, so sometimes I was a little bit lost, maybe more than a little bit. But, well, it's an old game from 2005. I mean, The Pokemon games from back then were definitely higher quality, but I won't judge. This is a small game made by a tiny studio, or even one person, I think. So, yeah, why not? For a small game, it is still very good. After a thorough exploration of the castle, I headed to Nikal, which was literally just somewhere up there. And this place was tiny, but I was incredibly struggling with the controls. The game has this sort of point and click mechanic, which is kind of nice, but at the same time it has a really terrible pathfinding. Sometimes you can't tell where exactly is the collision box for certain objects, and you can't really tell what you can interact with and what you need to click. For this reason, it's way better to just use arrow keys and the keyboard. It is definitely visible that it wasn't made for the PC, but rather for a PC-like device, something that you could literally carry in your pocket. Eventually, I found what I was looking for, the tutorial house. And let me tell you, oh my god, this game has one of the worst tutorials I have ever seen. Usually in video games, the tutorial is part of the first mission. You go there, you defeat the enemies that are supposed to teach you the mechanics. It's all relatively simple. Here, almost everything is explained to you through mountains and mountains of text. Now, the story is sort of interesting. The tutorial building is literally comprised of people whose sole job is to talk to the hero of the legend and, well, prepare him for what awaits him on his journey. Now, these people are very actively breaking the fourth wall. It's not uncommon for games to do that, especially the older ones, so I won't hold it against Arvale, but still, you just talk to the NPCs and they tell you, well, here you go, this is what you're supposed to do, this is how you fight, this is what the stats are for, and it is literally the equivalent of an info dump. It's very hard to work with it, and so after I left the house, I was still properly confused, and it took me quite a lot of game time to actually fully understand the mechanics. Very quickly, I also ran into my first fight. This was the tutorial fight in the game, and I have to say, it was not bad actually, at least at the first glance. The entire RPG system is simple. You've got your weapons, you've got your magical supplies, and you can freely just swap between what you're going to use. Unfortunately, the entire game seems to be this big, glorified rock, paper, scissors mechanic. Simply said, at the top of the screen you can see the sort of symbol that says whether or not your weapon is useful or useless. The minus means that your enemy is resistant to this particular type of damage, plus means he's weak to it, and the equal sign basically means there is no resistance or weakness. Usually every enemy is of a specific attribute, so it means he has one weakness and something he's actually strong against, or something he's resistant against. This sounds good on paper, but the problem is it lacks variety. Usually the entire combat consists of choosing the right weapon, smashing the enemy until you run out of HP or the enemy dies, and if you run out of HP, you just pop a potion or two, and that's it. The game doesn't have a very good gameplay loop, and that's honestly what sort of made me not like this game that much, at least at first, because, well, so far I've only been overwhelmed by a tutorial and a combat system that didn't even feel all that interesting or in-depth. I would say this game could really benefit from like status effects, like setting enemies on fire, confusing them, stunning them, doing something to them other than just dealing damage with different elements that, in the end, all do the same thing. Nevertheless, I was still determined to continue for now, but I very soon ran into another problem with this game. I had no idea where to go. I went through the entire tutorial house, but nobody told me, well, now you should go here. It was as if I was suddenly thrown into this world, given this big presentation speech that super confused me about how the world works, and now it was my job to find and slay the dragon. It was a lot. This game does not have a very good beginning, I would say. And so I just sort of swam in these waters trying to orient myself and learn where everything was. Eventually, though, I did manage to find my way around the town and I explored the different merchants. There are three types of weapons: the sword, the spear, and the club, dealing slashing damage, piercing damage, and blunt damage. And then there are three elements: fire, earth, and water. Literally, as I said, rock, paper, scissors. Very simple. But then there's also armor, which actually reduces how much damage you take. And everything in this game has a durability. Armor will eventually break, and your tools have limited uses. This actually means that you need to keep restocking. Now, that's not exactly a bad mechanic, but I mean, people hated it with the old Zelda Breath of the Wild, so they are bound to hate it even with this game. I personally don't mind when weapons break, but you have like 30 uses of one weapon. In the early game, it felt like too little, and then the game just sort of started spamming my inventory with weapons, and all of a sudden it didn't matter anymore. It's odd. At the same time, you have different tiers of items with different effects. Not effects as in they would do something else in combat, but different damage. Now, obviously, those would be more expensive and would require better stats to use. Now, eventually, my journeys have led me out of Nikal, and I just sort of began looking around. I found this little signpost that essentially said that to the west there was like the hero cave, and so I set off to confront enemies in the cave. Now, the entire game is very simple as far as RPGs go. There is no overworld. You go from place to place. In the place, you fight enemies, solve maybe some simple puzzles, though to be honest, this game didn't even have that many puzzles. To me, the most puzzling thing was literally just the story and figuring out where to go, rather than actually doing puzzles in the dungeons like you would expect from Zelda or Pokemon. So here it was more straightforward. Go to the place, kill enemies, and just loot whatever you can find that isn't nailed to the ground. It was also in this particular area where I found yet another slight flaw in Arvale. Honestly, it's not really a flaw, many RPGs had it, but I just really don't like it. Random encounters. Sometimes, if you're in a dungeon, you just have to backtrack. Sometimes you get lost, sometimes you just want to double check if you haven't missed anything. And, well, here, everywhere you go, if it's not in a city, you can just run into an enemy. And with a combat system as simple as the one we have in Arvale, that can get very annoying very easily. Now, there are certainly other games that had this, but honestly I would have just preferred if the enemies were on the map and I would know they are there, and that maybe they would respawn if I left the area, but not these random encounters. That just made me feel like every step I took had to be well thought out, and in a game where you just want to explore, that feels kind of dumb, to be honest. Now, I kind of liked how the Pokemon did it, where essentially there was only the tall grass where the Pokemon could ambush you, sort of. But in this game, it could literally be everywhere. And I'm not a huge fan of this mechanic in any sort of RPG, not just in Arvale. Now, eventually, my exploration of the cave led me to a boss room. And this was very, very much a boss room. I mean, there was this sort of healing platform called the Source Synth Point, and, well, from there, it was quite clear that there was something difficult that would await me. Now, the boss fight in this case was also just a part of the whole hero's quest thing. Basically, this mage was sort of guarding the amulet of the hero that would allow me further passage up north. And, well, to be honest, I sort of expected something different from a boss fight. Very soon I learned that the boss fights can be approached in a very similar way as normal fights, even though they look a little bit flashier. Basically, you just have to calculate how much damage you're most likely going to take, and then you just use healing items whenever your HP is down. Again, this was not a challenge, it was not, well, anything. And that bastard even healed, back to full health. And he wasn't the only boss who did this throughout my playthrough. I mean, the bosses literally had potions they could pop on their own. So, to be honest, I just wanted to continue the story. I wanted to talk to the people, explore the cities, see the different places. But I couldn't because this guy just refused to go down without having his one last shot of a potion. Oh boy. Eventually, I defeated the mage though, and he gave me the amulet that would allow me passage over some sort of a bridge up north. And I also figured out, and I don't remember if it was because of this mage or someone else, that the dragon was actually sitting somewhere up north. So far, everything looked, well, like it was prepared for me. You know, the tutorial was prepared, the wizard that was guarding the amulet was also prepared because he was just sort of sitting on several heaps of these amulets. Mine was number 27 out of a 200 collection. It was quite humorous, I would say, as if it wanted to make fun of the entire big hero quest sort of thing. So on one hand, the game wasn't very good at storytelling at this point. It felt generic, but at the same time it was making fun of itself and how generic it sounded. So I kind of liked this tone. It was as if the story was trying to be the sort of meta-criticism of the genre. Why not? I like that. With all the money I obtained in the cave, I went to buy some proper equipment. Some wands of each element and some weapons, and that was actually quite nice, but they were very expensive. Now, the nice thing about Arvale is that you can actually have different builds here, and that's quite nice. At first I wasn't quite sure what role would magic play and how different it is from weapons, and well, I figured that out quite soon. Magic is powerful, it hits hard, but is also more expensive. At the same time, weapons, they don't require minimum stats to be used. For example, a sword does not require a certain level strength to be used, but it gets stronger with more strength you have. So in theory, you can focus on playing either a mage build, which is what I did, or a strength build for the normal weapons, and both of that works and you don't have to use both at the same time. Now that was quite nice because in theory you could have different playstyles, even though they, as I said, in practice didn't really make that much of a difference, but still, at least some choice. I also learned what it meant, the whole source synth business. Basically, source synth points were like places where you could enhance yourself for the upcoming battles, and source synth was this big company that was like creating all the magical artifacts and all the potions and so on. So that was just a bit of lore that I figured out, and keep it in mind, it's going to be quite important later on. I wanted to explore the south of the continent a little bit more, but I haven't actually found anything that important or interesting. The only thing I found was like a forest that said the enemies here are super dangerous, don't come here. And I thought that since this game is very, very old, it's most likely going to be a warning. It essentially means these enemies are too high level, you're going to die if you come here, idiot. So I listened to the game and went north instead, just following the questline. Eventually I made it to this small town of Thimpote, and Thimpote was nice. I obviously looted everyone's house, had a very pleasant conversation with a wheelbarrow, and then I continued until I found Brain. Brain was a guy who gave me a quest about a certain woman called Silk, who was actually trapped in the Entoke's castle dungeon. And I swear to God, I thought this was a side quest. Like, everything about it just screamed side quest. I mean, I'm here to slay a dragon and this guy just tells me, hey, my friend is in dungeon, can you get her out? That did not seem like a main quest, and well, I didn't realize it was a part of the main quest until much, much later. The interesting thing about Thimpote was that they had these scholars, very cool scholars with very cool tattoos, by the way, and the scholars essentially gave me all the important information I needed. Basically, I was looking for this specific material called abazine, which I had to mix into a coma potion that would put the dragon to sleep. The abazine could be only found in the ruins of an old civilization where the dragon rampaged in the past, so I had to go to these ruins, obtain the abazine, get the goddamn potion, And then, well, go north further and find the dragon, put him to sleep. Very easy, right? Well, not really, but at least I finally knew where to go and what to do. And after a little bit of exploration and shopping, I finally found my way to Arheldum. Arheldum. That's like the worst name I could ever imagine. I kept saying Ardelheim, and that sounded better than Ardelheim. But sure, I guess that's a name. It's just one of those many names that are really weird in this game. I fought my way through countless hordes of enemies in this dungeon until eventually I found a door that said that the statue of a dragon and the statue of a spear have to be aligned. Apparently, this civilization existed back when the dragons and humans were still coexisting, until eventually the dark dragon Tissilon, I have no idea how to pronounce that name, decided to go on a rampage for whatever reason, and the gods gave humans a spear to essentially put the dragon into slumber. So far, that was pretty much the legend. No, seriously, how the hell do you pronounce this name? I have no idea. Tissilon, Tillon, Dylan. Anyway, eventually I did find the statue of the dragon and I aligned the statue. I have no idea what it meant to align a statue without moving it, but sure, it was now aligned. And I also had to align the statue of the spear, or rather the spear that could be found in the other room. A problem is that the container where the spear was lying was, well, it was sealed and it said I require a key. Now I had no idea where the key was, but in my mind, I thought, hey, this place is pretty big, I probably just missed the key, okay? So why don't we just go back and try to find it? And I've spent like half an hour doing just that. If you've played Arvale, you probably know that this was a big fuck up. I was literally running around the dungeon looking for something that wasn't even there. The key was not in the dungeon, not at all. And I was just running around, getting hit by monsters over and over and over again. And that's when I really thought that Arvale was becoming an incredibly frustrating game. Because if you get lost, like me, if you get stuck, and that is very normal in video games, you are doomed to fight enemies over and over and over again because the enemies are just randomly attacking you in the world. Even when they are not there, they can just randomly ambush you if you take a step. And every single combat was the same, just using the right weapon and bashing them over the head more and more and more until I would level up and then keep doing that for half an hour without any goal, any objective, just looking for a key that did not exist. Now at this point, I was just tired. Arvale seemed annoying because I barely got anywhere. The story was mediocre, just a big joke pointing at the overuse of Hero's Quest type of storytelling, and then I got stuck with nothing to help me, no wiki that I could quickly turn to for guidance, nothing. I honestly felt lost, and the repetitiveness of combat made me incredibly frustrated. Now, I want you to guess, where do you think the key was? That's right, the key was not in the dungeon. It was obtainable through the side quest I got given by Brian. Remember the guy? Remember the guy that talked about his friend Silk who is locked in a dungeon in Entoki Castle? Yeah, apparently that thing was a main quest. How the hell was I supposed to know that? It sounded like a side quest. There was nothing telling me, hey, this is also a main quest, maybe you could do this. So I explored everything. I went back to Nikal, I went to Thimpote, I was just exploring everything until I finally returned to that goddamn castle. Before I figured out where to go, however, I explored everything, and that included a forest full of monsters. And oh my god, I was just getting fed up with it. Like, the forest was an interesting location, but there was There was nothing, just a lot of monsters and a repetitive combat and no story. Let me tell you right off the bat, the story does actually get better, don't get me wrong, and I actually got invested and excited. But at this point, this was the big breaking point of frustration. I didn't know where to go, and nothing was really offering me anything new, anything that wouldn't be boring. So I was, rightfully so, I would say, confused and irritated. Fortunately, my irritation did not take very long because I thought, hey, let's actually do this side quest. And so I found Silk, and Silk told me, hey, I know something about the dragons, but you need to get me out of here. And I thought we're going to have a big jailbreak scene, and that actually sounded interesting, and she was just like, no, I just need a skeleton key from one of the guards. Could you get me the key? And I was like, you know, maybe the guards will not like the fact that I'm just letting a prisoner out? Nope, they literally did not give a shit. As I was searching for the right guy to have the skeleton key, I actually found this little storage room with beginning weapons. And I thought I wanted to just smash my head against the table. They were here all this time, weapons and armor prepared for me to help me on my journey. And I forgot. I forgot to take it. I felt like such an idiot. Eventually though, I did find the guy with the skeleton key. It was a guy called Rufus, a legendary adventurer who was like, yeah, I'll give it to you, but you need to give me 200 gold. And I got kind of confused, like the skeleton key literally is for opening the cell, and he is selling it to me, pun not intended. Like there's this adventurer, not even part of the guards, an adventurer who has a key to this cell that he's willing to sell to me. The guards don't apparently seem to give two fucks about that. And I can just set Silk free and nobody says anything. I'm not a wanted criminal because I'm the hero of the legend that I can set any sort of villain free from jail. For a moment I thought, you know what? What if I just released everyone and caused like a big revolution? Maybe they would just sit down and quietly die just because I'm the hero of the legend. But that was a bit of a wishful thinking though. We just set Silk free and now it was time to return to Brian or Brain or whatever his name is. I returned to Brain and sure enough he had the crypt key. I have no idea how the hell did Brain have it, why he had it, and I mean most likely he planned this entire thing, but oh my god, I was so relieved to finally have it so that I could just go back and finish that quest and progress with the story. So I aligned everything, found the Abyssine, and then the great Arvale god Ipoleus emerged from nowhere. I have no idea why did this god appear. I mean, I'm literally just a man with a couple of wands and a couple of swords and this big flaming god known as Ipoleus just emerged and was like, no, you can't take my rocks, berries, whatever the hell Abyssine even is. I'm guarding it. Like, this was so random, but the fight was, well, I want to say cool, but not really. It was just the same thing over and over again. But the boss looked cool. I mean, look at that guy. He's all fire and stuff. So, at the very least, it was interesting. So, the god was slain, I had the Abyssine, and was ready to make the coma potion, but something was off. I found this man in uniform who was apparently there to study the ruins, and this made me feel like something wasn't right. I mean, no video game programmer, no designer would ever put an NPC to a seemingly random location where no NPC was previously needed just to say, hey, I'm just exploring these ruins. It seemed redundant, it seemed weird, something was off. Sure enough, my suspicions have proven to be, well, justified. after I spoke with Brain again, and Brain told me that essentially he has to tell me something, but now was not the time, and that I had to go to the Salty Orc pub in the northern town of Deers, where apparently he would tell me more. So that was my next stop after making the coma potion and actually being ready to put the dragon back to sleep. This was quite a lovely place, and after I met with Brain there, he actually told me the truth. And to be honest, I was not expecting that, especially not from a game that came out in like 2005. Brain essentially told me that everything about the entire journey of the hero and the grand quest is a lie. And I guess I could have expected it, but yeah, all of that suddenly started to make a lot more sense. Basically, Source Synth is a big magic company, and they are harvesting all their magic that they're using for their products from the sleeping dragons. Dragons, that's right, plural, because there's apparently several of them, and they're just putting them into coma perpetually and using these heroes for it. No hero has ever made it out alive, so, well, basically a hero goes, dies, and then Source Synth can just sell their potions and wands as if nothing happened. And apparently, Brain and this organization Veritas that he belongs to, well, they are sort of mortal enemies of Source Synth, and Source Synth wants them dead. So now, my quest was, to go back. All the way back. So after all that running around, I got some new errands. Basically, I had to find the dragon key, which the magistrate apparently had, but the magistrate obviously would not just give me the key, because he has problems with his daughter, who apparently ran off somewhere to Nikal and to Entoki Castle, due to love and so on, and he wants her back. So basically, I had to go and somehow wrestle her back to Deers. Now, that was complicated, but I sort of accepted that. But I also needed the anti-coma potion. Basically, the coma potion would put the dragon to sleep, but I would need something that would wake it up. And who else to help me than, well, the one who made the coma potion in Thimpote. And I asked myself, how the hell would I get that potion? And Duncan just straight up said that he fed it to his dog, and the guy was like, "Did you fucking poison him?" And no, I just literally lied my way out of it. Like, I accidentally gave this super rare potion to a dog, and now he's sleeping, and I need to wake it up. I mean, I was surprised that this guy wouldn't just say, "Well, it's your fucking mistake, he dead now." But no, he did make me the anti-coma potion, so at least in this regard it was a safe and quick quest. The same, unfortunately, could not be said about Kyra, the magistrate's daughter, because I was supposed to talk to her, but she obviously didn't want to go willingly, so for a moment I just thought, do I strike you now? But, well, basically she said that she will only come with me if I bring her an Entokian soldier's sword. So all the way back to the south, to the Entoki castle, find the sword and somehow bring it to this lady. So much traveling. Now, rather than just wandering about and talking to every guard, which I mean, kind of tried as well, I went to King Entoki and just asked him right away, "Hey, do you have a sword somewhere on these premises that I could take?" And he told me, "Yup, it's in the soldiers' quarters." And now the question was, where the hell is that place? And so I spent like the next 5 minutes just looking for it, because the entrance is kind of hidden. I mean, look at it. I went to explore almost every single place, and then there was this tiny little wedge in the wall, and that's the door. Yep. And then I just had to find the right soldier, talk to them, and they gave me the sword. But still, things were complicated. Now, I brought the sword to Kyra, like the good hero I am, and that bitch still wanted more. She got the goddamn Entokian soldier's sword, which I would assume you don't get unless you're part of the military, and then she asked for a new brooch. She just wanted a brooch from apparently this super cool accessory dealer in Thimpote. God damn it, lady, I've been traveling half the continent just to get you back home so I can get a key to do my goddamn job. If the king knew how much trouble you were getting me into, he would have your head cut off. But sure, off to Thimpote I went. Now, she couldn't just tell me who her contact and dealer is, and guess what? It was actually Rufus, the hero, the goddamn adventurer, the one that I met in Toki Castle, the one who gave me a skeleton key, I think. So yeah, apparently he was trying to make gold on the side by selling accessories. So I had to buy the goddamn brooch. Unfortunately, Kyra didn't really tell me that it's going to cost me like 300 gold, which I didn't have, so I actually had to sell some of my loot just to get the brooch for this goddamn lady who won't go home. Seriously, this could have been resolved with me just taking the club, whacking her over the head and dragging her back to her hometown. But no, I had to do it the hero's way. And then, in the end, it turned out to be super pointless because apparently one of those Sorsynth bastards tried to woo this lady and he was just really being nasty about it, so I beat him up and then she was like, oh no, I better head home. So all that running around was pointless. If this Sorsynth guy was a little bit faster, I could have just saved myself a lot of trouble. Either way, I beat up the Sorsynth, that was kind of fun. And Kyra said she would go home, so yay, at least that is done. So I returned to the magistrate in Deers and he was like, oh, I actually had the key to the dragon all along with me, and I just thought I always assumed you would. After that entire fiasco with the lady in the prison and the goddamn crypt key, it did not occur to me for 1 second that the key would be anywhere else than in the pocket of just some NPC. Yep, so with this done, I could finally go back to saving the world, and it was time to head into the mountains and face the Dark Dragon Tislan. Tillian? I guess something like that. Now boy oh boy, this trip was long, and then after I actually found the dragon, well, it's turned out that he's not a boss, he is literally just I don't know, he's the size of a cow, I guess? Apparently, if he doesn't eat, he gets smaller. I'm not quite sure that's how nutrients work, but I mean, it's a magical dragon, so what do I know? Maybe making a bigger sprite would eat up more memory, and maybe it's an issue of whoever made this world, but hey, I don't know much. So Tislan basically told me that there are several dragons, and I essentially need to go to them all, and I need to travel the world, and so on. Basically, the real quest against the corporate greed started now, and that was actually quite nice, because that is actually a story that makes sense. He also told me that obviously he's not evil, he doesn't eat humans, only like small animals, and that he has no idea what actually happened at the Alvalheim ruins, where apparently he went mad like a couple of years ago. I had no idea what to expect, and honestly I just wanted to sort of dive into this game until this very, I would say, unexpected twist and turn in the story, because, well, my friend actually told me this is a perfect place to stop unless I wanted to play the whole game. And so I used a ship and I sailed off to another continent. And let me tell you, at the beginning I thought this was going to be some tiny game, finished in a couple of hours with charming NPCs and some jokes here and there. But then I went to the world map of this new continent and holy cow, it is so much bigger than in Toki was. In Toki really was just the tutorial. Who would have guessed? So that was my adventure in Arvale. To be honest, I liked the game, but not enough for me to continue on this quest. When it came to this game and its beginning, I really thought it would be, well, boring, because it seemed to be. To be honest, the beginning really isn't all that good. You just wake up, are told you have a quest, and it feels like a mockery of other RPGs, which is certainly interesting, but I would sort of expect something more from this sort of game. And then you move to Nikal, and the tutorial doesn't really teach you anything, so you just need to understand things as you go. But eventually the story does get interesting, and to be honest, I enjoy the different NPCs. I enjoyed visiting the different cities, talking to the people, and I did enjoy the jokes, like Duncan literally telling this alchemist that he accidentally gave this super rare coma potion to his dog, and the guy just asking, is he dead? I mean, it sort of caused me to chuckle, I'm not going to lie. However, I do have some problems with this game, namely the fact that it's definitely not made for a PC, and it shows. The game is tiny, and that means resolution tiny. It is not very good to look at it. I mean, sure, the graphics are nice and charming and reminds me of those old RPGs, but what good are those graphics when they are on a tiny display and you literally cannot make it any bigger? That is sort of uncomfortable. Then, obviously, there's a problem with gameplay. When it comes to turn-based combat, I am not a huge fan, but it's still not all that bad. But I still feel like even the older games, like the older Pokemon games, at least had a system of like status effects and different abilities. Here, every single attack, every single weapon does exactly the same, and you just need to match the right element or attack type, which is interesting, and at first it didn't really seem all that bad, but I had really been fed up with it by the time I reached to Ceylon's lair. I mean, that place was long and filled with monsters, and every single combat was pretty much the same. Just keep clicking until they drop, heal up once out of combat, rinse and repeat. Not even the boss fights were all that interesting. I mean, the bosses didn't have any mechanics, they didn't have any extra special dialogue during the battle. The only thing that happened was basically you were fighting and now they would reduce your HP, and so you would have to drink a potion, and then the boss would drink a potion themselves and bring his HP all the way back to 100%, so you needed to do the entire thing one more time. And of course, all of that was accompanied with some really good music. I mean, for an older RPG, this music felt perfect. It wasn't something you would probably see with like modern games, but at the time, this must have been pretty damn good. And therefore, I wouldn't say Arvale was a bad experience, but it's not something I would really want to replay further. Now, of course, there are some other problems I would have with it, like for example, the fact that some of these lines were written poorly, there were many typos and mistakes in grammar and so on. But hey, it was not made by some big studio, so obviously these things can just happen. Now, if you want to give Arvale a try, I would honestly suggest you do, because it's not so bad. Now, downloading it is a little bit tricky because you actually need to use the Wayback Machine to obtain it, which is definitely difficult. And when you do, well, you're on your own. There is no guide, there is no tutorial, I mean, aside from what is in the game, there is no wiki. You are literally on your own. And apparently there are several other episodes to this story, with the second one being also very good, and then the later ones being sort of meh and like rinse and repeat additions taken right off the RPG Maker store. I don't know, apparently the future episodes or future sequels are not all that good. But this one, definitely not bad, and I would highly recommend it. I hope you enjoyed this little trip that I've taken you on, and hopefully I'll see you soon with some other video. See ya.